Hi, everyone. You're listening to Bug Talk, a podcast created by members of the Entomology department at Michigan State University. My name is Sophia, and today I'm here with Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hey, excited to be
And
here.
I'm also here with Jen, my co host. Hey, Jen.
Hey everyone.
Rebecca was a department seminar speaker a few weeks ago, and she talked about her research. And so today we brought her on to get to know her a little bit better as a person behind the scientist. So, first question, Rebecca, could you please tell us about yourself? Where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I am a Michigan kid, born and raised. So I actually grew up in the neighborhood in which I currently live, which is kind of part of my, I don't know, general story of trying to get back to Michigan after doing grad school. So it was important to us to be by family in the end.
Yeah, that's pretty unusual to be living in the neighborhood where you grew up.
hmm
So tell us more about, so you were born in around Flint or in Flint?
No, so I guess technically when I was really young, we lived in Warren and I grew up in Troy.
Okay.
And my family is, they're all engineers except for me. So I am the like weird one who likes to play outside. Um, I grew up with a family who likes doing outside stuff, but not like a camping family or like an outdoorsy family. Like we aren't, no one hunts. My dad's actually Canadian, so I grew up ice skating. My mom loves swimming, just doing like outside stuff, but not necessarily like nature, a lot of naturey stuff. Um,
But it sounds like science was part of the blood
Science
in
is
the family, right?
definitely part of it. So my parents are both first generation college students in their family and went into engineering. They actually met in Flint at what's now Kettering University, was GMI at the time. So if it weren't for Flint, like I would not exist as a human. My parents met there in college. And engineering seemed like interesting, but I just didn't know. Like as a kid growing up in, I had this support, like I had parents I could ask for help with like calculus homework and stuff, which is such a rare experience. And I was very lucky. But I honestly didn't know you could do this kind of stuff like as a job. So I thought if you were good at math and science, like you could be an engineer or you could be a doctor. So I thought I'm going to be a doctor, like a medical doctor. I thought that's what I wanted to do when I went away to school.
So were you good in math?
Math, yes. I went, well, I don't know. I mean, like I took AP Calc, I took AP Physics. In high school, I was lucky to have some of those opportunities. I really liked it. But once I got to college, it was just like, I wasn't as excited about it. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't until I took, I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead. You can go ahead. But
Oh,
like
you're
for
fine.
me, it was an entomology class just totally actually changed my life, which is maybe the most cliche statement I could say on the Bug Talk podcast, because maybe everybody says that exact same thing.
No, no, not everybody. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to get into. I was thinking like you never really were exposed to nature. It seems like not on like a high level other than science until later. And what really got you interested? Was it that
There's a
entomology
couple
class?
things. So like, I don't want to sound like my parents were like not outside. Like I grew up, there's a park right by us. There's a nature center that's like at the end of my street right now that I grew up going to. My parents would take us there a lot, but we just weren't like camping people. I feel like a lot of people that get into ecology anyway tend to be really, they do that sort of thing a lot. We went to a few national parks. I have a very vivid memory of like being in sixth grade at Yosemite and like seeing hikers. I thought they were so cool. Like I just wanted to be them. And I remember trying to pretend that like I was them and like trying to make my shoes look dirty. So I like looked like a hiker. I just thought they were super cool. And so I would try to like do those kind of things on my own. And I used to like check out like guidebooks
Mhm.
from like the library. My mom has this story of just like patiently waiting with me. for us, like the Natural History Museum in our area, we don't like, there's not one in Detroit. So like we would do like the Field Museum, go on a trip to Chicago, but are either of you from Michigan? Anybody? I think
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I actually grew up in the Detroit area, and I was actually born in Flint.
Hey,
so a little
Jen,
similar.
Awesome. So did you grow up going to Cranbrook on field
Yes.
Okay,
My mom works right next to it.
Shut up. Okay, so like
Yeah.
the rock room, I would just like stare for hours at rocks, and like my parents would just wait. They would just like patiently wait, and I would just look at all the rocks, and I wanted to see every single one. And I still have my rock collection from when I was a kid. So like I was humored, and clearly like looking back retrospectively, like that is what I wanted to do. I just didn't know it was a real thing. Like I didn't know you could do it. So it just took a little bit of like wiggling. I was a bio major. Like I went from pre-med to be a bio major. And so the thing when I talk to students anyway, it's not like you know exactly what you're going to do, but for me, it was just you keep trying things and then you keep narrowing it down. So it's like you figure out what you don't like as opposed to what you do like.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
that's kind of how I would describe it.
That's how it was for me too. So did you ever feel any pressure at home to become an engineer or to at least have a career in science?
None at all. Like my parents were really, really, really supportive of just do the thing that you're interested in and try things out. And my sister ended up being an engineer, but my mom would always say how when she was growing up, like she wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And she was able to do both of those things while also being an engineer. Like as in the 70s, like that wasn't a very easy career path. And she just like went for it. She's like, I'm going to do this. And like not very many women were doing it at the time. So I always looked up to my mom for that, like just kind of following this sort of thing. And it was my mom's example of like, oh yeah, I love history. So we traveled as kids, like to go see stuff because my mom was interested in that. She wanted to be a coach, so she would coach our softball teams. She wanted to be a teacher, but like as a parent, you get to be a teacher. So I had this example of like, you can have this diverse array of interests and still have this different, like you can do a bunch of different ways of doing stuff. I don't know, I'm not really into it, but no, there wasn't like pressure for something.
And how about like going to college? Like was that something that you considered, or it was like an automatic thing that you thought this is the way things are going for everybody, so I'm gonna just go to college?
I don't think I ever would have thought twice about like, am I going to college? But where to go to college was not an easy one. I was actually I played volleyball. I played a bunch of sports. I was always in a sport. And I actually was like recruited for volleyball. I chose a D3 school. I went to Kalamazoo College for undergrad. And I had a really hard time deciding, like truthfully. I think when it came down to it, the two places I was trying to decide between were Kalamazoo College, where I went, and University of Chicago, which seemed awesome and also kind of seemed intimidating to me. And it was sort of like, well, if I really want to do Chicago, I could do that later. Like you don't have, so I don't know. I would have played volleyball at either one. And I went to Kalamazoo College, and that was
How was it?
Hard. It was good. Like, I'm really thankful I made that choice. I think it really helped me. Like I wouldn't have known any of these things at the time. I had a lot of friends who went to Michigan in Ann Arbor, and it was just such a different experience seeing that, like the big school and the big sports and so many people. And at the time I was like, should I have done, like, I don't know. But I'm so thankful looking back. I went to a small school. I think that was really important for me. Like my biggest classes had maybe 30 or 40 students. I had that entomology course I'm mentioning. I think there were less than 20 of us in there. Some
Who
groups.
was your professor?
Dr. Ann Fraser.
Ann Fraser, yay.
Yeah. So she's amazing. She was in E.O. Wilson's lab and like went to grad school. Like I think now that's like later in life is the way she just, I don't know what that meant, but that was the way she would, but yeah, anyway, she was amazing. And we had to do an insect collection in that class. And I have like very vivid, distinct memories from that experience. It was great.
So yeah, we have had, like, since I've been in the department, I'm aware of multiple graduate students that have been um, ignited, or their interest for entomology has been ignited by Anne. So we thank her very much
You're
that she's
kidding.
sending us students
Oh,
to the department.
yes.
Yeah, we have had at least like 3-4 that I'm aware of, maybe even more. But yeah, we know her. We know
She's
her well.
amazing and so smart and so kind and
Yes.
so supportive. Like she's
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, she is. I'm glad you ended up taking her course. So that's the one that changed your life, it sounds like.
I think so. Between that and then we did at Kalamazoo, we there's this thing that's abbreviated the SIP. It's your senior individualized project. So every undergrad does a research project over the summer, normally between your junior and senior year, and you like write your undergrad thesis. So Dr. Fraser and then Dr. Benny Girdler, who ended up being my ecology professor, they were both like really influential. And I worked with a Michigan State graduate student at KBS, Erica Garcia, who now, I can't remember the name of the institution where she is. She was in Gary Middlebach's lab and now lives in Australia and does her science there. But she had this experiment at the pond lab looking at ponds that did have fish and ponds that did not have fish, and these artificial ponds and real ponds. And so I got to sample them looking for the aquatic macroinverts. So like looking at everything else that was there. It was awesome. Like she was studying Chaabris, like the fly larvae that were like in the water columns, but like we got to go out on these midnight canoe things to like go out in the middle of these ponds to go midnight sampling because they were like not when they were moving at night. And it was just so cool. Like I was just like, wow, I had no idea this is a thing. I'm just gonna try this and we'll just see what happens.
Oh,
I had
really
no
cool.
plan. Like I didn't know what I was doing.
So I'm curious, did you end up like starting your undergrad knowing you wanted to do biology, or was that something that came later? Like, did you start with a totally different major?
I was pre-med. Like I knew I thought I wanted to go to med school, but I think I came in like super cocky and like I'm a biochem dual major. And of course I can take both of these labs at the same time while playing on the volleyball team. And then I was like, oh wait, I actually don't know how to study at all. And like my first few years, I wasn't kidding when it was hard. Like and this is part of that pressure, like not pressure from my parents, because like I got there, my grades were like, whoop. Like I had to figure out what to do and like, how do I study and how do I learn? And I don't know how many people go through that in undergrad, or like you show up just knowing what to do, but I didn't know what to do. It was a whole different world for me. By senior year, I figured it out. And especially like junior to senior year, it was like, oh wait, this is what I need to do. And it just took me time to work through that. So it's something I share now with my students. Like, I mean, I'm happy to tell you my first couple of grades I got on things. Like, that's not a big deal. We're just all like working through the process. So no, I didn't start. I knew something. I thought med school, and then it was the more classes I was taking to fulfill that bio major, the more I realized this is what I'm super excited about.
Yeah, I think that's a relief for some people to hear, because I think a lot of people think scientists, you have to get all A's throughout your undergrad, or you can't do it. But
No,
I think that's so
D's
true for
on a
so many
transcript.
people.
I'm not kidding. Like literally, I have D's on a transcript from at least my first couple of years, and then in between, I like I retook an organic class at some point later on just to make sure like I could prove I knew how to do it once I knew how to study for it, like what to do.
Right.
But yeah, for me, it was a lot of like how to manage your time, and instead of trying to do things all at once, like to those little layers of peeling back and looking again and again and again. But no clue what I was doing. Not at all.
So what made you take that entomology course?
Junior year.
Okay.
So it was like going into that, it was before my the SIP would start. So right before I started the research experience. So I was like fresh off of this class where I got to like run around collecting. I literally had mono the semester that I had it, like the spring quarter that I had entomology.
Ouch.
And I still went out, like I had to finish, like I couldn't not do it. And Dr. Fraser, she tells me to call her Ann now, and I just like can't. I don't know why. Like Dr. Fraser was like, you're fine. Like, what are you? I'm like, no, I want to keep going. So I have this like really vivid memory of because I went home when I was not feeling well. And like my parents were out in this field with me, like collecting things with this net I got to borrow. But yeah, it was right before my undergrad research experience. Then I got to spend that next year writing it up. And it's actually, I want to say it was Dr. Fraser again, but I can't think I was in her group for that, but she encouraged me to go to an undergrad research conference. So I got to present that work as a poster, which was really cool. And just kind of was like, this is totally what I want to do. So yeah.
And what made you take that entomology course? Was it an elective or it was part of the?
It was an elective. Yeah. So just one of those, like, I'm so thankful for this liberal arts approach to education where you take all these different things that you might not realize how or why they were, whatever, but it was one of my elective choices toward my bio major. Cool. Not a requirement.
So that got you like started in entomology, and then how did the decision to go to graduate school come about?
It just seemed like that was what you had to do the next steps, which I know now isn't true, right? Like you can go into science communication, or maybe if you want to go into science journalism or museum management or something. Like I didn't know, I didn't like not choose those things. I just didn't know they existed. So I thought that was the next thing that I had to do. So after graduation, or like working toward graduation, I was just like applying to research assistantships for a year. I wasn't ready to apply right away to grad school. And at Tay, we were on quarters. So like I was trying to finish my thesis and do all this. I was like, I can't take the GRE right now. Like I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to find something, a research assistantship for like a year maybe, and see how it goes. Like just try to get some more research experience. Because that summer, like working with Erica at the pond lab, that was my first research experience that I had. So I just felt like I had to try it out a little bit and then figure out what grad school meant. But I wasn't ready to figure it out right when I finished undergrad.
And so what did you do in that year?
I was extraordinarily lucky. My first job was a summer position working with Ray Winfrey. So that was where bees and being obsessed with bees came from. So it was literally the day after graduation, I packed up my stuff, and I remember my parents were there, and like half the things went home in the moving van, and we jammed my car full, and I drove to New Jersey, and I started work the next day. I think she was a postdoc at the time at Princeton, working with Claire Kremen's lab. And it was the watermelon and cherry tomato pollinator observation, like from that paper. So I was one of the field assistants on that project for the summer.
Yeah, I was a postdoc at Rutgers, and she was a new assistant professor there when I was there. So I think that publication was coming out right around that time when I was there. So that must have been like a really good introduction to pollinators.
It was awesome. Yeah.
So tell us about that.
That year, there were 3 of us who were the sort of field research team. And one of them, Hannah Gaines, who's now, I want to say in Wisconsin, but she was kind of like our team leader because she had done that the year before also. And then there was an REU student, her name was Christina, I can't remember. She went to a University of Wisconsin school and was an REU student who was also working on the project. And then Neil Williams was at Bryn Mawr at the time and had a couple undergrads who were working on the project. And so we would all go out to these farms, like we'd be like deployed out to a farm for the day, and you would like arrive and figure out where is the crop row that you're interested in. And it shifted what plant we were watching, and you would go and like count all your flowers and just sit and do observations all day, do some like plant identification, and that was, I mean, that was the whole thing. It was like making sure you could identify your bees. We'd take these bee quizzes to make sure we could learn them when they were flying up, because they're kind of like to morpho species as we were identifying them. But it was, I think if you describe that to people who aren't into it, like my friends did, a few of my friends, not all my friends, some of my friends like think this is also a thing, but others like, wait, you like sit in a field all day? You watch a fly? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay. So it's like, I think this is right because this is awesome, you know, and maybe it doesn't sound awesome if it's not the right fit for you. I don't know. But I don't know if you've ever tried to explain like literally what your field day is to people who don't do this. And they're just looking at you like, you do what?
Yeah, I try
Like,
not
why?
to.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. You fell into this group of people who are now like iconic in pollination
Yeah.
ecology. Like how did that happen? Like that's amazing.
Honestly, it was luck. And I don't know, maybe it's embarrassing to share this, but like I remember applying and then she had left a voicemail, but as a millennial, like I don't know how to check that or like what to do. And so I like almost missed this job because I had a voicemail from Weyburn, like, and I didn't realize it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think you never know, right? Like just try and make people say no. Like you never know. And it really helps that I had that insect ID
Mhm.
experience as an undergrad and I had taken entomology before. And so I was able to like show I had some of that experience. But yeah, looking back, just like, wow.
I
That was a
guess that
really,
that one sealed your fate right there, like pollination going
it's
forward.
been, that was the summer of 2005. And I
Uh-huh.
have been studying bees ever since,
Yeah.
thanks to that project.
Yeah. So I have a bunch of questions, but I want to turn it over to Jen. Let her.
Yeah. So after that, were you just like gung ho about going to study bees in grad school?
Yeah.
Where did
But
you
I
end up
still like,
going?
I was at, I went to Northwestern, and
Okay.
that was also like another one where it sounds like I had a plan if you look at it on paper, but I had no plan. So I like heard of a job that someone at the Chicago Botanic Garden was looking for a research assistant for the summer. So I applied, and it was Erica who recommended, like Erica, who I did my senior thesis with, like, oh, hey, this job looks cool. Cause you just keep in touch with people, right? And they share information. So I applied and got the job. I was super excited because especially like going to Kalamazoo College and being a kid from Michigan, like at that time, it was like everybody just like got up and sat down in Chicago. Like everybody moved to Chicago after graduation for whatever reason. And so a few of my friends were also moving there, and it was like, this is perfect. Like I'll work at the Chicago Botanic Garden for a bit. The extent to which like this was not planned, I thought it was in Chicago. It's not. It's in like the suburbs, like an hour drive north. I didn't even realize that. But I took the job. Like I remember interviewing on the phone outside of the lab, like in New Jersey, and just like took it. Like, yeah, great. Okay. And my cousin lived there at the time, and I asked her to like go find us an apartment. And then two of my friends I went to school with for college, we just moved to Chicago, and I started my research assistantship, which just also happened to be the first year of the master's program in plant biology and conservation, which is a joint program between the Chicago Botanic Garden and Northwestern. So my first year as a research assistant was the first year of that grad program, which I then applied to 2 years later to be a master's student.
Wow,
So
that's
cool.
really lucky.
Not a plan.
Not a plan. Yeah, you seem to be lucky.
It's just like, yeah, no, it is lucky. It's completely lucky. And so it's hard now to like tell students like this is what I would recommend, because it was like I feel like a lot of my decisions were based off of where do I want to live, and just something will work out, I hope. And you just have to, either you have a plan and you're not flexible on some of the choices and then you get to where you're going, or I was flexible. And so because I just sort of took what came or like fell into what was available. I don't know how to describe it, but I think a lot of it's just random luck.
Yeah, and being open to opportunities
Mm.
like you're describing, I think is very, very important, recognizing where there is an opportunity. So tell us more about what you did for your master's.
Sure. My master's, the paper actually, I think is going to be the most cited paper I'll ever have in my life, but it's bees and green roofs, which at the time in like before 2010 was not a super big thing. So I worked at the Botanic Garden for a couple years and then applied. And for my master's project, the true story, like the hashtag overly honest methods story of how it came about was I just wanted to go on the green roofs. Like it seemed really cool. My advisor at the time, Jeremy Fant, who is awesome, we were just sort of talking about ideas and we're like, wouldn't this be cool? Like, is there anything up there? And so that's just kind of how it was born. Like, okay, let's compare what's on the roofs in the city compared to on the ground, like a paired site right on the ground. And are they the same bee species in those places? And then we chose a handful of restored prairies sort of in the area to serve as a sort of baseline for like, what will we expect overall? What's on the ground in the city and what's on these roofs of different heights and different ages in the city.
It's awesome. I think that these fellowships, like the one that you were funded on, allow this kind of outside of the box thinking. So it's not quite aligning with the PI's research. It may not be funded by an agency because it's considered too out there. But it turns out to be like a really great idea, right? And the fellowship is what made it happen.
I'm not even sure what it was, how I was funded for it. Like part of my master's this is all like, this entire thing is couched in privilege also, right? Because like I have my parents as this backup plan. And for my master's, I had a little bit of a scholarship through Northwestern, like everyone tends to get a little bit of something for the master's program. But also I had help, like I had help financially in paying for it from my parents because I had the scholarship and then tuition money, like help. And then the research aspect of it though, there's another thing that like, I just didn't know. I didn't know when you went to grad school, you were supposed to do what your advisor did. I did not know that.
Good,
like
good on
Jeremy
you.
is a molecular ecologist. So like he was like, oh yeah, sure, let's go for it. Have you ever heard of an NSF GRFP? Like, let's try this, which I was like, okay. Like I don't know what I'm doing. Like that didn't turn out to anything. But I just sort of pieced together like a few little grants and it was enough to get done what we needed to do. And I was working as a research assistant in the lab also, like that was my part-time job. Like I had a job and then I had school. So it's one of the nice things about that program is a lot of it, you can work on this broader project, but it's also totally normal to do your own thing, which I think has been really helpful for me because I have not, in the entire thing, I've never, like my PhD advisor, I applied in the same program and I was I'm actually the first PhD student to graduate from the plant biology and conservation program at Northwestern and the Botanic Garden. But my PhD advisor, Dan Larkin, who's now at University of Minnesota, he's like a wetland restoration, like plant focused guy. Like he's not like a bee person. And it was, everyone in our lab studied like the effects of blank restoration on blank community. Mm-hmm. So we all had that in common and we used similar like analytical tools and like things, but we like the other grad student who was in my lab at the same time as me was also a PhD student, Paul Hartzog. His was on like wetland restoration and denitrification. Like very different, but it helped me learn how to get grants because I think that sometimes you kind of get stuck in as a cog. Like in some programs, maybe it's like, here's your part of this thing, just do it and there you go. But it was like I had the experience of having to create the whole thing. So it was, I think, really helpful, especially now as like an early career person trying to carve out these ideas, because that's the only process I knew, but it's because I didn't know that wasn't normal.
Right.
I don't know. I'm coming off sounding pretty naive, but that's fine. Like that's
no,
also
I think
true.
this is great because I mean, if you haven't been to grad school, how would you know, right? So everybody's like,
I didn't know. Yeah. And like I had, like we keep saying, I had like a ton of family support. They're like, go for it. But like no one, some people can just like ask their parent, how do you get a grant, or like ask a whatever. And I can't imagine what that would be like having someone who knows what academia means or like understands
Mhm.
that system. But sometimes I think it's been really helpful for me to not know, because
Mhm.
I tried for things that maybe I wouldn't have done if I like knew the odds or something like that. Just like, huh, can't hurt, might help.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Right. So I want to hear about your findings from your master's. You said that was your most cited paper
Yeah, I think
from the
it
green
has
roofs.
like, yeah. So the thing that was neat for that, and I partnered my taxonomist collaborator for that was John Asher. There's another one of those where like I didn't know better. So like as a master's student, I literally just emailed John Asher and was like, "Hi, I work at the Botanic Garden. I study bees. Can I come visit you and learn?" And they were like, "Okay." So like John and Jerry Rosen invite me to the museum, and I just like hang out for a few days and like get to follow them around and learn what they're doing. And they were so nice to me, but I didn't know that was like a weird thing to do. So it was, or maybe it's just like cold email someone and say like, can I come visit? Um, so yeah, that also happened. I kind of forgot about that. But from that, and because I had the species level IDs, the things that we learned from it that were really neat, like one, there's bees on green roofs. And at the time that was cool. Like that was really cool. And the second one is that, again, at the time, a lot of the sort of like urban pollinator things was looking at green space, like proportion of green space as a predictor of diversity or a predictor of abundance, which we actually found a strong negative relationship between those things with green space. But once you separated out natural area as opposed to just green space, it was a very different story. So Chicago has these really cool natural area plantings that the Chicago Park District like manages and installs.
Mhm.
And those spaces are great for bees, but giant swaths of lawn, not so great, even though that's going to show up as green space in like GIS modeling type
Mhm.
of things as our
Oh,
main finding.
that's so cool. And I'm curious, like you said you switched labs, but you stayed at the same institution for your
Yeah,
PhD.
again, I didn't know that
Like,
wasn't normal.
yeah, okay.
I
So
didn't
yeah.
know that you couldn't. So yeah, especially in that program too, it's like very, Dan was new and I'm Dan's first pancake. It's like I'm his first grad student.
Uh-huh.
So Dan was brand new to the program. They were just starting the PhD program. And because of that project, my question was really getting into what are the impacts of restoration and the reason on native bee communities, like habitat prairie restoration on native bee communities, which led to my PhD questions. And the biggest reason why, like the two sites that were the most similar were this huge restoration site that was a little bit downstate, and one of the city parks where it's literally like a little plunk of prairie on Lakeville, like it's east of Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, which none of that is real land. It's all Lakeville. That was all swamp. And they had the most similar bee communities, like really high diversity, really high abundance. So it's like, was this park very, very special? Or is something terrible happening in restorations in that we're burning too frequently and somehow restricting, like putting these filters on our resulting pollinator communities without realizing it? So he was like a Midwest restoration person. And so that just seemed to make sense. And it wasn't weird at all, but now I just didn't know that wasn't something that people did. I don't know. I'm close with both of them. Like Jeremy's a good friend. Like it wasn't weird. But Jeremy's a molecular ecologist, and a lot of his work is focused out in the Great Basin. So it was just this seems like it makes sense.
Mhm. Jen, go ahead.
So after that, did you end up like after your PhD, did you end up here in Flint, or did you do a postdoc, or what
I did
happened
a
after that?
postdoc. So this is another one. Like, I was a Smith Fellow, And that's another one that those are, I didn't know how hard they are to get. Like there's hundreds of applications. They pick 4 or 5 people. It was just like, oh, that seems neat. I'll try for that. Like, so I met one of my mentors from that project, Gerardo Camillo, who's at St. Louis University. I went to ESA the last year of my, like as I was preparing for like wrapping up my 6th year. And I was giving my talk and talking about how like, spoiler alert for my dissertation work, like restorations are good for pollinator communities. And there are these other parts that in the paper that came from that, I talk about the taxonomic diversity and like functional diversity. And there's this other, you know, like that chapter you never quite publish. I don't know if you're allowed to say that. There's another chapter on phylogenetic diversity that just said more of the same information. And I'm giving this talk, and Gerardo in the back was like, hey, have you thought about phylogenetics? And I was like, have I? But you like get to that hidden slide you didn't think you'd have time to show, and we like have this conversation about it. And it was like, oh yeah, this would be great. Let's try to figure out a way to work together. This could be really cool. And I was like, yeah, I'm really interested in city stuff. I keep flip-flopping between, do I want to do city work, or do I want to do restoration work, or do I want to like merge these two together? And so it's like, this is awesome. I'd like to do city stuff again. And okay, there's this one, like the Smith Fellowship seems really cool because you get to like devise your own project. That application is due in like a couple weeks. Let's go for it. That's what I did. Like I just wrote a thing about, I was really interested. It's like framed around shrinking cities. So coming out of Chicago, I wanted to move back to Michigan. At this time, I had a almost 2-year-old and was like 8 months pregnant. And we don't have any family in Chicago. So my spouse grew up in Illinois, like in the complete country of Illinois. He went to art school, and we met just in the city. And we wanted to live by family, and there were like jobs and city things. Like I said, he went to art school. He's in advertising, and he needed a city. So it's like, okay, let's move back closer to Detroit then, because there'll be something. So I found out I got the postdoc, and we just moved home. Like that's when we bought a house, when I was a postdoc. Because that's what I did. Like I don't know what I'm doing, right? So we chose where we wanted to live. And then, and I'm happy to talk more about that project too, if that's interesting. But like, I just I drew a radius around where we live and was like, how far do I want to commute for work? And then I would just look for jobs once a week and apply to whatever came up. And the Smith was a 2-year.
So you ended up turning down that fellowship?
No, I took it.
You took it. Okay,
I took it, and then I was like, "Hey, Gerardo, this is great. We got the fellowship.
Except
so
that I'm
gonna move to Michigan." And he's like, "Detroit sounds good." Like, I didn't know that was a weird thing to do, right? So then we did this in the 3 separate cities. So the Camillo Lab has like a bigger scope. They just published like a Bees of St. Louis. And so he did some St. Louis things, and then me and actually an undergrad from Kalamazoo College. So I hosted a SIP student for our field work.
Full circle.
We did Detroit. And then because the fellowship's like awesome, you get this research money. I had like a field team leader and then a couple students who did the same thing in Chicago. So we're looking at the impact of like urban agriculture. So community gardens and urban farms compared to vacant lots. And looking at like what is supporting pollinators essentially.
Mm-hmm. So it ended up working out that you moved to Michigan.
It ended up working. Yeah. So I applied for anything that was coming up, and there were a couple things like schools I was applying for. I was like, okay, I'm going to try. I really want to be a teacher. Like this whole thing for my mom, right? But like, I know there's more than one way to do that. So I think at first I'm going to try for academic things, and we'll just see what happens. And if in a couple years, or like figure out a deadline or whatever, if that doesn't work out, maybe I'll start a native plant nursery, or maybe I'll do a nonprofit, or maybe like, I don't know. So I was just applying, and got an interview at U of M Flint and was so excited. And that's my job, is offered the spot.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear more about, I know in your seminar you talked a lot about your work with like the community in Flint and how that's been a big thing you've done at U of M Flint with the Porch Project. Would you be able to talk a little more about that?
Yeah. So the name, the Porch Project, and the idea is my community partners, and her name's Megan Haza. She's awesome. She, when it started, lives on the east side of Flint, and she like fixed up her, like changed the landscaping in her yard, like took down some overgrown things and fixed up her front porch, and just realized that like she got to know her neighbors better because people were out talking to her more, because now she could use her front porch and like see people from it. And I met her at, I'm just gonna say a coffee shop because I can never remember which one. It was either Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts, I can't remember. But I was asked to go, someone in our Office of Research connected us because there was another community partner who she works closely with, like another block leader, who had transferred or like transitioned a string of empty lots into like a fruit and vegetable garden space. And they were interested in knowing some other plants that would be beneficial to attract pollinators. So like, oh yeah, we have a person who kind of does that. Like, why don't you meet with them at this coffee shop? And so I, happy to recommend whatever. And Megan mentioned the Porch Project, and I was like, well, what is that? Like, could you tell me more about it? And she explained it, and I asked her if she had any money for landscaping. Like, well, maybe like some of the structural stuff is more what we're going for. Like plants can be expensive. We might do some marigolds or something like that if we have money left over. I was like, well, would you be interested in other plants? Because based on what I do, I can get research money to do that if you think people would be willing to let me like come back a couple times and just like look at them, like stare at them for a little bit. So that was how that started, was just kind of us trusting each other, really.
And now that's the main thrust of the lab, right? That you have.
Yes and no. So there are different things. So this is really the research side of what comes out of the Porch Project is like undergraduate-led research project. So my student Megan Kate, who's now graduated and she's at PA school, she came up with this project. We initially thought the story, so people can choose which garden they want. Most people don't care. They're like, you pick whatever's going to match my house better, whatever. But there's like a native plant landscaping garden and a non-native version. So it's like hydrangeas, sort of English roses, hostas, compared to the like Rudbeckia and some phlox, like just two different treatments. And we thought we would have this like neat and tidy little story with a bow about, aren't these native plants great in cities? And it's totally not what we found in doing these pollinator observations. We have 2 years of data. COVID kind of messed up our third and final year, and that's been hard because I really miss the neighbors. It's supposed to be like our last year doing it, but it's okay. But it ended up being the plants that were in the sunshine, like the ones in the sun. So Flint has meant, Jen, maybe you remember, like a lot of huge trees in the city that were built way back, like in city planning. I don't know how old some of these are, more than 50 years easily. So a lot of the yards are very heavily shaded. And so it just ended up being spaces that tended to be in the sunlight where the plants that we were observing were getting more of the visits. So she has a poster, she's presented on that, and we're working on the manuscript. But also in the lab are some other broader questions. Like I still have a foot in prairie restoration stuff. And for the past couple summers was bringing students with me, again, COVID, there's a prairie plot experiment at the Morton Arboretum that my advisor at the time, or Dan Larkin, and then Andrew Hipp, who is a scientist at Morton, sort of designed this giant, it's looking at like functional diversity and phylogenetic diversity combinations in the plots. So we've done some pollinator observations there. I have another student who's just graduated that we're looking at some of the like plant traits based on the different treatments, because we noticed the same species in different plots physically looks very different once they are grown up. So some starting questions on that. So I have like a foot in the science that might seem more difficult, right? So I can like throw out these phylogenetic trees and all this stuff and whatever. Truthfully, the community work I think is a lot more difficult and takes more time. So that's like real, it's a different types of difficult, right? But the phylogenetic ones might be in a journal that seems fancier.
Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time, Rebecca, so we're going to start wrapping up. But before we do, where can people find you? How can people reach out to you if they were interested in the kind of research that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is a thing. I think you have the way to share that somewhere.
I will put it in the show
email
notes.
me. You can absolutely just email me.
We'll leave a link to your webpage, your faculty webpage as well. It's great to know that you're so close to us here in Michigan doing wonderful work with bees. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing with us all the goodies and hopefully encouraging people to go to graduate school, even if you don't know what you're doing quite on the way.
No one knows what they're doing. This is like the biggest thing. No one knows. Just go do what you're interested in and something will happen. Just trust your gut. That's my trust your gut.
Trust your gut and go with the flow and stay open to opportunities, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you again. And
thank you. It's been great chatting.
Yeah, it's been great to chat with you. And thank you everybody for listening to this podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.